If you guys enjoy what I do, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel and it's free and easy to do. Welcome to my channel where we cover the lore of Final Fantasy XIV. We cover the stories both big and small, the epic and the cute, the silly and the tragic. I hope you all enjoy the ride, and welcome to the Chronicler of Lore. The Scions of the Seventh Dawn have all gone their separate ways to have adventures of their own, but that doesn't mean you can't stop by to check on Tataru. She's happy to see you, but the real reason you stop by is for the tea and snacks. The Rising Stones is quiet with everyone gone, but Tataru is still keeping track of everyone because apparently she has sources scattered all over the place. Obviously, she has way too much free time on her hands, and she wants to spend some of it talking about what you plan on doing next, since traveling to the edge of the universe was apparently not enough entertainment for the Warrior of Light. Since you're always spending time helping people, she figures it would be a good idea for you to set aside the title of Warrior of Light and just do some exploring for yourself like the old days. There's still a lot you haven't seen, and Tataru thinks the best place to start exploring is Thavnir. It wasn't like you actually had time to tour Razat Han when you were there last time, since the world was ending and stuff. And of course, there's the Bounty Sea that you can explore since the Garlean Empire doesn't have control of that area anymore. Or really any area after their entire nation went to crap, so you're free to explore. And since Selk did mention the ruins beneath the Bounty being somewhere that the bearer of Azim's crystal should go, you have a lot of stuff to do. Tataru, as usual, had planned on making some traveling clothes for you, but they're not finished. She claims that it won't take long, but after hours of sewing with the Warrior of Light falling asleep quite a few times because watching somebody craft is not all that entertaining, she finishes. But not before you have a strange dream about a void scent returning to the 13th shard. A void scent that definitely was the one bonded with Xenos. But that's something that's gonna be a problem for another day. For now, Tataru has whipped up your new outfit for the small price of having you wear it so other adventurers will want to buy their own. With your new outfit thrown onto your expanded glamour plate set, you head off to Thavnir to gather information on rumors and quests the old-fashioned way, by hanging out in a tavern. The server at the tavern in Razat Han takes a minute to recognize you, but when she does, she's eager to help you in any way that she can after everything you did for her nation. And since she sees all kinds of people in her line of work, she actually has a patron who has been talking about a sunken treasure vault. He's actually at his usual table at the moment, because luck is always on the Warrior of Light's side. His name is Professor Jalene, and he'll happily talk to anyone if they buy him a drink or three. Since you get to drink for free because of your hero status, pumping the man full of happy juice is easy. With a few drinks in him, Jahil starts to tell you the story of Azadal, who was the leader of the Auri tribe that sailed to Thavnir and played a pivotal role in the history of Razat Han. He was the reason the Arkasodara won their war with the Gajasura, which led to the founding of Razat Han. But the person who was really interesting was his grandson, Azadal III. He was the satrap of Razat Han in the early days, and some people say that he managed to travel to a different world and came back with a lot of treasure. The sunken vault you were hearing about was his. The stories say that he took over a small island in the middle of the Bounty and built an underwater storehouse where he stored all of his treasure. Since that day, every time the people of Razat Han fell on hard times, stories of the treasure would pop back up and adventurers would try to seek it out. Most of them never made it back home. The ones who did survive wouldn't even mention what they saw. Recently, a friend of someone he knows was trying to set out to find a temple, and he was desperate to buy a treasure map from a merchant that was supposed to show the entrance to the place. Jalheen can't remember the merchant's name, but his friend Azama should know it, and the man came in while the two of you were talking. Once you tell him who you are, Azama lets you know that a friend of his did go out searching for Azadal's legacy. He's been watching the seas, but he hasn't seen any sign of his friend. He tried to talk the man out of going, but all he talked about was the vault and his want to find Azadal's otherworldly hoard, and he wouldn't be convinced not to go. He had talked a merchant into telling him the general area where the vault was, since Zashal was selling a map to the place that the man couldn't afford. He was only able to buy a hint that said there are some ruins on an island in the bounty that has a hidden path to the vault. The Warrior of Light's pockets run a little bit deeper than most people. Well, mine did until I put in a bid on a medium house in the Imperium, so she goes to find the merchant. The man's not hard to find since he has a small crowd around him, complete with a young orphan boy who's trying to convince him to give him the map for free so he can find the treasure and feed his sister. He claims the map's not a fake and has a magic glyph on it that's needed to get into the ruins, so even if you find the place without the map, you can't get in. He found it in some rubble after the final days, and now he's trying to sell it. The orphan boy is clearly working with him to try and convince people to buy it, and of course it works on the one person who's even worse with money than Alphino, Estinian. He doesn't even ask the price before he hands over a whole pouch of coins. He buys it before he notices you, but when he does, he can tell you're planning something. When you tell him you were planning on going to the ruins, he points out that he just bought a map to the place like you can't see the giant rolled up parchment in his hands. Now what is surprising is the fact that Estinian wasn't tricked at all by the merchant in the performance, nor does he know whether or not the map is fake, but he does know that the two of you will need a ship to check it out. He hopes it is real because he wants to get the treasure to help the people of Thavnir recover from the destruction they dealt with during the final days. That was the reason he bought the map. He knew it was a scam, but the part about the boy being an orphan and needing to take care of his sister was real. So if the money they made off of the little scheme helped the kid a little bit, Estinian considers it money well spent. Since you're definitely going to go with him, the two of you head off to find Matsia, since the Arca Soldara is a fisherman and probably your best chance to get a boat. Matsia is more than willing to get a boat ready for your trip, and when he runs off to do it, Estinian calls out for the little orphan boy to show himself, since he's known the whole time that the kid was following you since you left Razathan. The boy had felt bad for scamming Estinian once he realized that he was one of the people who had saved them. He should have felt bad about being a con artist no matter who he duped, but I guess this is a start. Since Estinian hadn't been tricked, he forgives the boy, but there's more. Apparently the map is legit, but the ruins are dangerous, and he doesn't want two heroes to go out there and die. You should at least bring more people with you. Estinian is pretty confident that the two of you can handle whatever you run into, but it wouldn't hurt to have some help along. Unfortunately, finding Thancred, Urianger, Alphino, and Alisaie would be difficult since the twins are out in Garlemald somewhere, and there's no telling where Thancred and Urianger have wandered off to. But Grahatia and Kral are in Sharlayan, so you go to get them while Estinian takes Marad back to the city so the boy won't get eaten on his trip back. Kral and Graha are exactly where you expected them to be in the Baldessian Annex, and they are of course happy to see you. The two of them have been putting together the records of all the activities of the students of Baldessian. There's quite a lot of them in the library of Sharlayan, and adding that to what you found in Eureka means they have a lot of paperwork to go through, meaning they probably won't have time to go out adventuring with you. Kral actually had something that she wanted your help with, but seeing how Graha is struggling to contain his excitement at the chance of going exploring with you again, she decides that her task can wait. She'll keep doing the research while you and Graha go to this treasure vault, as long as you aren't gone for too long. Graha is happier than a kid at Christmas, and since this little expedition could lead to some interesting discoveries, he figures that it would be a good idea to bring Y'shtola. Since the Scions went their separate ways, she spent a lot of time in the Google library trying to figure out how to travel to other worlds. She didn't have much luck, so she came back to Sharlayan and has been going through the books in the Numenon. Since it was rumored that Azadal had been to other worlds, Y'shtola might find this little venture to be worthwhile, and of course her company is always welcome. Before you go to retrieve everyone's favorite catgirl, Kral suggests you bring Urianger along too. He had sent a request to the students of Baldessian for some papers talking about the architecture of treasure vaults and stuff. Apparently the Loporrits are trying to improve their creations and want to learn how things are built on Etheris. And since Urianger is working with them, letting him see the underground treasure vault will work wonders when it comes to helping the bunny munchkins build the next place that will likely kill you. Kinda wondering if they're gonna be the ones to build the next deep dungeon. The Warrior of Light has no problem bringing Urianger along, so after you retrieve Y'shtola, you and Graha will hunt him down. You find Y'shtola snoring on top of a pile of books, which is odd for her, because she never falls asleep while doing research. So instead of waking her, you and Graha plop down beside her to scare the crap out of her when she wakes up, which works like a charm. Granted, she looks like she wants to kill you both after she makes a book fall on her head. She had been reading for 3 days straight before she passed out, and she still hasn't found any hints on how to travel between worlds so she could fulfill her promise to Runar. But that doesn't mean she's even close to being discouraged. She sees it as a challenge, one that she plans on getting back to after you tell her what you want. She's heard of Azadal, but she's never heard of his descendant traveling between worlds. Now that she has, she's definitely going to come with you. She wants to leave as soon as possible, but first you have to get Urianger from the Thaumazein. She's eager to leave, probably because she didn't want to have to put the mountain of books back on the shelves. Urianger is hanging out by your favorite rocket ship, and he's alone. Thancred had some personal errand to handle, but he should be back soon. The two of them had headed off together to see just what shape the world was in after the final days, but their trip was interrupted when they got a call from the Loporrits. The Moon Bunnies have been trying to figure out a new purpose for the moon, since it's not needed as an escape shuttle anymore. The Forum has been working with them, and Urianger decided to help too. Apparently the Moon Bunnies believe that adventurers like treasure hunts, so they're building a quote, wonderland of riches and mystery to draw in explorers. The place is likely a theme park of blood and death if Smileton is anything to go off of, and Urianger helping likely won't change that, but he'll gladly come with you to get some ideas for the bunnies. Plus it'll be fun to do something that doesn't involve world-altering events. With the 5 of you including Estinian, you should be able to handle whatever you find, but as you get ready to head back to Estinian, Thancred shows up. He had tried to catch up to one of his former mentors, but he had missed him. I'm not sure which one he meant, but we'll probably find out later. He did notice that the land is in chaos after the final days. Since people no longer have a common enemy, that's to be expected. While he does seem a little bitter about you stealing his traveling partner, he doesn't think it'll be a good idea for him to come with you. Too many scions traveling together may make people ask questions, so he decides to survey the Far East while you all head to meet Estinian. The Dragoon had expected you to come back with one person, but you showed up with a small army. Matsuya's boat should still be able to hold you all, so with the map in hand, your group of supposedly disbanded scions head out to Azadal's legacy. The merchant wasn't lying. There are ruins out there, and if you hadn't brought the map, the bridges and doors wouldn't have opened for you. While the map gives you access to the place, it doesn't change your ether, so the various security devices try very hard to kill you. I can definitely understand why the people who came here never made it back. But the Scions fought their way across the universe, so even facing off against an enemy that wraps you up in strings and spins you like a top doesn't stop you. The trip does turn out to be worth it, because not only is there a lot of treasure, there's a giant device that's sealed up that definitely has something valuable inside of it. It would be a wasted trip if you didn't open it, but before you do, Vritra, using his tiny mortal body, comes rushing in to stop you. He can't imagine why you're all there because there's no way the heroes who saved the world are acting as simple tomb raiders. Estinian is bad with anything deceptive, so he outright admits that's exactly what you're doing. The device you were about to touch was meant to seal something away, and knowing that your curiosity won't be sated without an explanation, the dragon opens the device to reveal a very functional void gate. A small one, but it is a portal to the 13th shard. While everyone else is creeped out, Ishtola, of course, is excited. The sight of it leads to a lot of questions, mainly about how a void gate came to be made in underwater ruins. For that to make sense, Vritra has to talk about some events that happened 5,000 years ago when the Allagans invaded Mericidia. The people joined Bahamut and Tiamat to push the Allagans out of their land, but after Bahamut was defeated, the Mericidians started to lose, so they summoned primals to help turn the tide. To counter that, Emperor Zan made a pact with the Cloud of Darkness, so the war between Allagans and Mericidians evolved into a fight between primals and Voidsent. You can only imagine how much death and destruction followed that. Vritra had heard Tiamat's roar, and he had raced off to join the battle with his sister Ajdaya. He was the last of Midgard Sormer's children to hatch, and his sister had raised him, so he was there with her when she fought against the army of Voidsent. But no matter how many she took down, more would appear. The battle seemed unwinnable, so Ajdaya did the only thing that she could think of, and flew through the Void Gate to fight the creatures at their source. Vritra tried to follow her, but the rift closed too fast. She's been lost ever since. Graha hadn't read about this in any of the Crystal Tower's records, but the Allagans probably just thought the dragon had gone crazy and done something stupid. For years, Vritra had hunted for a way to reunite with his sister. He had searched until Alec was gone, and the techniques that were used to open a void gate that a dragon could fit through were lost. Before the founding of Razat Han, Vritra had searched everywhere for a way to cross the rift, and under the sea he found a naturally existing planar fissure. Unfortunately, it was too small for a dragon, so after the city was made and grew, Vritra got the alchemist to work on expanding the rift. Eventually it was large enough for a child to fit through. The dragon used one of his smaller bodies to go through the rift, but he didn't find his sister. Instead, he found a lot of void scent crowded around the opening just waiting to get through. He immediately fled and let the portal shrink. As the leader of Razat-Han, he had to choose between endangering his people or leaving his sister trapped on the 13th. The place twists the ether of those that are there, but the first brood scales are very resistant to ether changes, so even after 5,000 years, Ashdaya could still be alive. With the warding scales, technically anyone could go to the 13th and hold off the corruption. But Vritra has a nation to lead, so he can't worry about his likely long-dead sister. That's why he came as soon as he sensed intruders. He wanted to make sure that no one messed with the Void Gate, or his money. Much to Y'shtola's displeasure, he reseals the gate. Still, the fact that they managed to control the gate is great news for her. Unfortunately, Vritra doesn't remember everything about how it was done, but he will tell her after he gets new guardians sent over from the High Crucible. He has a lot of spare guardians around, so it's not that big of a deal. Granted, the Scions do feel bad when it's revealed that they were the tomb robbers that the alchemist had detected. With that done, Vritra explains that his alchemist had made a method that let his magic turn the fissure into a functioning gate. The process has been forgotten after so many years, and he hadn't bothered to write it down. Other than making another pact with a major void scent, which usually doesn't end well, there aren't many ways to open a gate. But that won't stop Y'shtola, and since Vritra gives her permission to study the Void Gate, she will probably be opening her own soon. While Y'shtola heads off to take full advantage of the opportunity to study the Void Gate, the Warrior of Light and Estinian stick around to help Vritra figure out the best way to use the treasure from the ruins to help out his people. It's the least you can do after you destroyed all of his guardians. While you and Estinian get started, on the 13th, an armored void scent sits on a throne and talks to four beings that seem to represent each of the four prime elements of earth, wind, water, and fire. They had sensed the Void Gate being opened from your world, but since the portal is so small, it doesn't matter much to them. They've been planning something for 10,000 years, and it's almost time for them to act. Still, the fact that you were able to overpower the Cloud of Darkness, even though she wasn't at her full power because of the covenant that bound her, you winning that fight even temporarily means you're a threat. However dangerous the Warrior of Light is, the Black Armored Knight has no intention of delaying his war to redeem his star. I have an idea on who those five beings are, but I think I'll save that for another video. One thing I know is that they're going to wreck us in a trial or two in the not too distant future. Completely oblivious to the fact that superpowered weirdos are planning on causing you problems, Vritra puts you on the task of figuring out which groups would benefit the most if he gives them a handful of money. He'd go ask the people himself, but even though he's walking around in the form of a small child, people would still feel uncomfortable voicing complaints to their leader, so he figured they'd talk more openly to you and Estinian. Vritra sends you out to talk to Matsia and his people to see what they need, while Estinian heads to Palaka's stand. When you're all done, you can meet up and discuss things. Kalzal's death hit Matsia's village hard. Since he's gone, it's been hard for him to sell his fish, but the people have been working together to keep everything working as best they can. Without the usual travelers coming through the area, none of the merchants are making any real money, and without their ships, they can't trade with other places. It's not hard to figure out what the people need, so the Warrior of Light heads back to Razat-Han. Estinian makes it back at the same time that you do because that's how things work for some reason, and the people of Palaka's stand are making things work despite the upsurge of refugees that came after the final days. Since they were always a community of hunters and gatherers, the jungle is still supplying them with more than enough food, but the majority of the nation survives off of trade, so Vritra figures that the best way to move forward is to get more ships and sailors. The dragon gathers up his main advisors and lets them know how things will go forward. Since his right-hand man died during the final days, the dragon will oversee the restoration of his nation personally. To start things off, he has to have his treasures sold for a more easily used currency. Then he will get the merchants back up and running with ships. But the children orphaned during the catastrophe can't be helped by just handing them some money. Fortunately, the Warrior of Light saw how the orphanage in Idleshire was funded by trading rare materials, so Vritra decides that as part of the new trade laws, anyone who uses some of his treasure to restart their business has to give part of their future profits to running the orphanage. And in honor of Kalzal, they named the new foundation after him. With everything organized, Vritra sends people off to get things started. It all gets set into motion right on time, because Y'shtola's made it back from studying the Void Gate, and she wants to talk about what she's found. For all of his talk about putting his duty to his people over saving his sister, Vritra wants to know what Y'shtola's found out too. She figured out how the device Reacher's alchemist made keep the void gate sealed, but she hasn't learned how to make it bigger, and without the records from those same alchemists, it'll be hard to figure out. That doesn't mean she's found nothing, it just means she's going to take a long time getting to the point, like most scholars. The first time the Warrior of Light had traveled between worlds, the Crystal Exarch had needed her to touch an item for him to use to latch on to your exact location, before he could snatch you across the rift. That spell tore a hole in the wall between the source and the first, and made a path that only you can safely travel across. That's very difficult to do on one world, let alone between two different ones, if how many times Y'shtola nearly killed herself doing just that is anything to go on. The process isn't any easier for Voidsent. The creatures are usually guided to the source by summoning rituals, but the creatures aren't brought over fully. The mages force open a void gate, and pull the creatures' souls from the 13th and put them in the vessels like statues and such. It was similar to how the Exarch accidentally summoned the Scions, taking their souls and leaving their bodies behind. The only reason that your summoning worked the way that it did was because the Exarch was using the power of the Crystal Tower to enhance his own. Normally, very few mortals can summon beings so powerful, which is why you've seen mages give their own life energy to summon stronger Voidsent. It's easier to snatch souls and guide them across the rift into vessels. They won't be as powerful as they would be in the flesh, but they'll still do some damage, which means most of the Voidsent you fought are far weaker than they would be under normal conditions. When the armies of Voidsent came during the war between Allag and Mericidia, the scientists had guided the Voidsent across the rift, but the much more rare planar fissures are pathways that weaker creatures can use on their own to just walk over to the source. But it still begs the question of why there are only fissures to the 13th and not, say, the 4th or the 9th shard. Personally, I don't think those fissures are natural at all. They're probably tears made by stronger Voidsent who are doing exactly what Y'shtola is and trying to find a way to travel between worlds. Y'shtola thinks that figuring that out is how to solve the mystery of dimensional travel. And Vritra immediately guesses that the crazy Catwoman wants to start doing exactly what she said she wouldn't do, and start working on trying to open the void gate wider so she can get to the 13th and figure out why it's so closely connected to the source. Vritra finds that idea to be horrifying, since armies of Voidsent were waiting when he had gone through, but Y'shtola just sees it as an adventure, one that she expects you to take with her. Since you have been there briefly and fought with the Cloud of Darkness, she figures you could protect her. Granted, they all keep forgetting that the fight ended with you running for your life. That doesn't exactly count as a win. Granted, while she's ready to go to the 13th, she doesn't know how to unseal the gate without Vritra's authority. As long as you make sure that if you die, you won't take Razad Han with you, Vritra will unseal the gate for you. And while the dragon doesn't remember how they expanded the gate, the alchemists of House Daemir were the ones who oversaw the project. They had started doing their research with a Voidsent that had made it through the fissure, and after they studied it, they made an artificial Voidsent of their own that they used in the rest of their experiments. They were so happy with what they did that they gave their notes to the leaders of Sharlayan at the time, but instead of getting the praise that they thought they would, Sharlayan locked the notes up in the restricted section of their library, which means a copy may very well still be in the Numenon. That means you're about to head to Sharlayan. Since he's not exactly the reading type, Estinian heads off to let Murad know about the new orphanage, while you and Y'shtola head to Sharlayan. Unlike the last time, instead of trying to have Graha sneak into the restricted section of the Numenon, you and Y'shtola ask Skalark Monashane and Alphino's dad Fortunov for a little bit of help. While the twins' dad still walks around like he has a large stick wedged into an uncomfortable spot, both he and Montashane agree to convince the Forum to let you into the restricted section, provided you tell them what you learn, because they are just as eager to know more as you are. Once the two of you are guided into the restricted section, you get to searching for House Daemir's notes. Y'shtola gets stuck reading one book, so you search around and find what you need. The book has a lot of information, starting with a very unique Voidsent, Atomos, which has the ability to summon other Voidsent from their world. The amount of Voidsent it could spit out of its mouth caused a lot of problems for the Radiant host when they fought. Since the thing was able to summon so many Voidsent, the alchemists captured a small one and studied it. They discovered that the Atomos had absorbed a planar fissure, and it could make it expand and contract at will. They noticed that when it widened the fissure to let Voidsent through, it let out a special ethereal wave pattern that they were able to replicate using a crystal and a prism. They put that prism into their artificial Atomos, finishing their construct. Y'shtola feels stupid for not thinking of that because the Atomos and what it could do was well known by most scholars. When the 7th Umbral Calamity started, there were Atomos seen all around Eorzea. The things were extremely dangerous, which explains why Charlene had locked the research away. But now that Y'shtola has it, she can move forward with her project. So the two of you leave the restricted area before Y'shtola decides to read other books. She wants to start making the Void Scent, but she's not exactly good at building stuff. Fortunately, you know someone who will be more than willing to help you, Nadana. As soon as the elephant alchemist sees the book filled with forbidden knowledge, like a true scientist, she can't wait to read it. And once she does, there's no question whether or not she's gonna help. She agrees even before she asks what you want to make the thing for. But when she finds out about the Void Gate, she takes it in stride. But she'll need to see the gate before she starts to work, because making mistakes on a project like this won't end well. Y'shtola has a few materials that she needs to gather first, but she was planning on heading back into the vault soon, so taking Nadana to see the gate won't be much of a problem. After you grab a bit of astrally infused water for Y'shtola's experiments, you, Estinian, Nadana, Y'shtola, and Vritra all head back to the ruins. Now by now I'm pretty sure you know that Estinian is one of my favorite characters, but the guy's not that bright. He is well aware of the fact that the Guardians of the Ruins belong to Vritra, and he was there when the dragon ordered for more to be sent after we broke the last ones. And as soon as you make it back to the ruins, Estinian destroys the new Guardians before Vritra can stop him. This guy's lucky that he's cool, because he's definitely dumb. Nadana had never expected to find such a high-tech device beneath the bounty, and she's a little salty about the fact that Vritra hadn't told her about it. But the best way to keep something secret is to tell as few people as possible, so him not telling her made sense. Y'shtola has more important things on her mind than Nadana's feelings about not being included. Some reports from Noah, the group that Graha formed when you all studied the Crystal Tower, reported that short trips into the void aren't all that dangerous to the individual's ether. But if you get injured or stay too long, you can be corrupted extremely fast. But Graha thinks that the warding scales that were used to protect from tempering could hold off the corruption, but Y'shtola would rather not use herself as a test subject, so she wants to send something else through first, a small familiar. Y'shtola can summon one, but she didn't really want to since she made the ritual when she was a child, so the summoning and the change in her voice is so out of character for the woman that Estinian outright thinks she's been possessed.
From ocean rise and cloudbank form, from mountain spring and rainfall storm, from river flow and life be born. Water, water, froth and foam!
It is kinda hard to picture a young Y'shtola, so I can kinda understand his feelings. She summons two tiny water sprites that look familiar if you remember the second boss in Matoya's Relic, which would also explain why Y'shtola says something about finally getting revenge if you take her into that dungeon as a trust. While the ritual did nothing for Y'shtola's dignity, her two sprites will make perfect test subjects. One she puts a warding scale inside, and the other will have to take the full brunt of the void's corruption. It is possible that something not so friendly can come out of the portal with the familiars, so you and Estinian get ready to protect Nadana if something follows the Nixies. When Y'shtola calls the two sprites back, the one with the warding scale is fine. The other one is definitely not. From the other side of the portal, Vritra hears something screaming at the gate to open, and imps start to force their way through, but the dragon manages to seal it with a bit of effort before that happens. The good news is that the warding scale did protect the Nixie, but the corruption of the 13th is so strong that the scale itself was being eaten away. But it was built to fight tempering, so it may need to be remodeled before it can be used on the corrupted shard. Estinian still doesn't understand much about the other shards and the corruption and such, because he joined your little group officially after the whole get sucked to another world thing. So Y'shtola lets him know how the 13th shard was a reflection of the source that was consumed by a flood of darkness when the Ascians messed up their first attempt at rejoining the shards. The world became a place of monstrous creatures, but you've met two people from there. Unakalai, the weird boy who you worked with when you dealt with the Warring Triad, and Silva, the bartender from the Crystarium who had been the Shadow Keeper. Unakalai had said that the Warriors of Light of the 13th had used Auracite to wield the power of primals, but the Auracite eventually corrupted them and turned them into ether-hungry monsters. By the time people rose up to fight them, it was too late. The shard had been thrown off balance, and the light was snuffed out, leaving the world in darkness. Elidibus had rescued Unicali's spirit and Silva's, which means he could have taken more people from the world that you haven't met yet. There's a lot that you don't know, and from what the Warrior of Light saw during her own short trip into the world of darkness, the place is extremely dangerous, which is the reason why Vritra doesn't want you to go through with your plans. But this is only the first step in Y'shtola's much larger plan. She wants to see all of the reflections, and this is the first step. Now that she knows what she needs, she has to find a way to strengthen the warding talismans, while Nadana gets started on the artificial Atomos. Of course, she will need a few more bits of paperwork from Vritra's archives, which the satrap is willing to give her, although he is a bit distracted. Something's bothering him, and Estinian can see it. The Dragoon is more interested in figuring out what's bothering the dragon than going into the void. He's not even sure he will go with you at all once the gates are open, but he'll discuss it with you later, once he's taken care of some business that he won't tell you about, because everyone just loves keeping secrets. So that leaves you and Y'shtola to figure out how to strengthen the warding talismans, and there's no question of who you're going to ask for the help. If you need something built, you go to Sid. When you show the very old looking 34-year-old engineer the talisman and tell him what you want, he comes up with a way to put a casing around the talisman that shouldn't interfere with the ether protection that it gives you, but it'll take time to get it working. He'll probably get Nero's help, since the man did a lot of studying on the corruption of the 13th since it nearly killed him. But the hardest part will be avoiding all of the other work that Jesse wants him to do. With that started, the two of you head out to Thavnir to see how Nadana's coming along with the Atomos. The alchemist has found some useful stuff in the dragon's private records that showed the purchase of some very unique materials that she is positive are what is needed to make the Atomos. Once she went to the High Crucible to show what she needed, she got a lot of other alchemists to volunteer to help with the entire project. Well, they didn't so much as volunteer as order her to let them help. How dangerous the job is doesn't matter to them, they just want a challenge. Vritra wishes he could throw caution to the wind and dive headfirst into trying to save his sister, but he has responsibilities, and he can't abandon his people for his own personal project. Apparently, Estinian figured that was the problem, so he went and told Vritra's personal guard, and his staff, and everyone else who would listen about the satrap's sister. And all of the people agree that he's dedicated himself to them for centuries, putting their needs before his own, so they wouldn't be worthy of his leadership if they couldn't hold the city together while he goes to rescue his sister. Knowing that his people are okay with it, Vritra in his smaller form will leave the city and have to rely on his supporters to run things while he travels with you to rescue his sister. Once the Void Gate is open, of course. Since the dragon is going, Estinian will be joining you and Y'shtola on your trip into the Void. One that, as we all know, will definitely turn out to be more dangerous than we anticipated. This concludes the story of patch 6.1 Newfound Adventure. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe, ding that notification bell, join the Discord, and if you really want to show your support, you can buy me a coffee through the link in the description. Until next time, guys, later.